Honourable Susan Carter.
Thank you. I too rise to take note of the report of the Social Issues Committee inquiry into the impacts of harmful pornography on mental, emotional and physical health, and I join with the Chair in thanking the Secretariat and thanking all of those people who took the time to share what can be quite difficult thoughts and difficult experiences with us, especially those young people who were very generous in the in-camera round tables. I think when we went into this inquiry, we'd read some of the literature. We were aware that pornography is always flagged as a risk in domestic violence. We knew that there was something here to explore. Speaking personally, I was overwhelmed by some of the evidence that we heard. We had young people telling us that they had been accessing pornography since they were 8, and this was not uncommon. Wonderful high school students who, when they knew I was doing this inquiry, spoke to me and said, and this is 16-year-old girls, I'm really worried about what the young ones are watching on the school bus on the way home. And the young people who told us they'd been accessing pornography since 8, look, I think we have to be really realistic. This is not stills from Playboy anymore. What they told us was that they were accessing what they referred to as BDSM kink. We want our children, our young men and women to grow up to form healthy, loving, respectful relationships. But if your whole idea about how you give yourself sexually to another person is formed by bondage and kink images from 8, that must make it so much more difficult to form those relationships that everybody really wants. And in fact, sadly, this is exactly the evidence that we heard, that the prevalence of pornography, and pornography that is almost always without any indication of consent, that is too often coupled with violence, that objectifies the parties in that relationship, that is shaping young men and young women's attitudes to relationship formation, and it is paradoxically standing in the way of them doing exactly what it is that they want to do. This quote from the It's Time We Talk submission, I think, sums up a lot of the evidence that we heard. Much of what is conveyed through mainstream contemporary pornography is contrary to the principles that underpin healthy relationships and sexuality. Yet for many children and young people, pornography has become a default sexuality educator. It is shaping their sexual imaginations, understandings, expectations and experiences with significant consequences for their well-being and the well-being of their partners. Some people submitted to us that, look, since the caves, people have always created and used pornography. What's the big deal? Clearly, from the evidence that we heard, a lot of the big deal now is the technology and the type and the frequency with which this material is being targeted through algorithms on social media and other places, is being directly targeted to our children. There was, I think, really interesting evidence, very well researched, from Dr. Marshall Ballantyne-Jones, who got his doctorate in examining this material. And he gave us evidence in relation to the early access of boys in particular to pornography, and then went on to say, and I quote, "Why is this concerning? The standard teenage boy has had more sexual experiences before his first kiss than a typical man would have in his entire life pre-internet. That is one of the major things that has changed. Standard teenage boy has had more sexual experiences before his first kiss than a typical man in his entire life pre-internet. And he goes on to say, thus, the neural pathways embedded and reinforced by pornography create deep preoccupancy, unrealistic expectations, objectification, obsession, insecurities, and confusion. We have a real problem. And as parents, as educators, as society, as government, we have to join together in responding. I note the Chair's comments that this committee has given us a roadmap. I find it very distressing that in the government response, they do not really appear to have sufficiently engaged with the roadmap which this committee provided. The government acknowledged all of the recommendations in a couple of pages and essentially said, yeah, got it under control. I think this point is best illustrated if we look at recommendation 3, that the New South Wales Government increase investment in services to support children and young people most at risk of displaying problematic and or harmful sexual behaviours. Now, let's be honest about what those problematic and or harmful sexual behaviours are. As Professor Michael Salter's submission on behalf of Childlight told us, more than 50% of child sexual abuse now is child on child. That is what we are talking about when we are talking about problematic and sexual behaviours. New South Wales Health has excellent programs which address this, the Safeways program and the New Street program. Professor Dale Tolliday told us that they cannot even come close to meeting existing demand. They do not keep a waiting list because they have no means of following up on the waiting list. They will point parents of affected young people to a psychologist or a GP in the community, but there is no way of ascertaining whether that appointments are made or whether that GP or that psychologist has the relevant training to be able to support that child. I asked the New South Wales Health Minister about this at estimates and what was being done to address funding. I understand he's going to look into it, but he wasn't even aware that these were health programs that need to be resourced. And the government's response to this recommendation was to say, we've got programs, we've got Safeways, we've got New Street, but without recognising that, again to quote Professor Tolliday, they cannot even come close to meeting existing demand. If we cannot seriously engage with the fruits of the harm that pornography is causing to our children, if we cannot properly resource programs designed to stop child-on-child sexual abuse, then who are we kidding? Yes, this is a complex problem. Yes, this is a multi-agency problem. But unless we actually start by resourcing these important programs, we will never adequately respond. And the people that we are letting down the most are our children and our young people.